my man. How are you?
Record, my brother. Doing well. I was
Doing well?
deadlifting yesterday. I'm sore. But speaking about athletes, let's tell everyone what you
No,
are trying out for this week.
I should never talk to you about basketball. Well, like it turns out I'm returning to practice for tryouts for the nationals team in the in the 45 years older category, which sounds amazing, except that it's a bunch of fat guys that are sweating a lot and can't run.
What what are your odds, do you think? 50-50 odds of making the team? 20% odds of making what are your
I'm a
chances?
very confident person. I like my odds, but the reality is, I don't know. Probably okay. I don't know. We'll
Well,
see. We'll see. I haven't touched
I
the ball in a long time, except when I played cornhole against you, of course.
well, that's what I
Uh,
was going to say is that I would probably bet against you, except for the fact that I played cornhole with you and saw that there is some athleticism there in that old body of yours.
but,
Yeah.
well, I'll tell you tomorrow how my body feels after a couple of hours of practice tonight. So that's what I'll do after this, and I'm scared. Now I'm looking forward to these are old mates, of course. I'll see a bunch of friends from 20 years ago and stuff. So it should be fun and it's
Yeah.
competitive, and I like a bit of competition. By the way, like are you competitive at work? Like, do you look at an issue of MS Quarterly that comes out and saying like, oh, Ahmed got a
No.
paper out, and
No. And
he ones up me or something? Do you do that?
this is one of my gifts, and this is why I think I've achieved in a couple of different things that I've tried, is I don't compete with other people. I always have goals and assess myself according to my goals. And I think that there are two kinds of people who achieve. There are the competitive ones that are like looking at the others and they achieve because they end up doing better. And then there are those who, and I don't really care what anybody else does. I think if we all succeed, it's all good. Like with you, I don't know what our relative count of papers is or anything like that. I bet you do, maybe, right? But I don't. I
No,
have no idea. I just know you're good. I'm good. These people are good. Who cares about the specific numbers or anything like that?
I also like I know you for years now, right? I don't think you're competitive at all, like in that sense,
Yeah.
as you say. I think I am more competitive than you in that sense. I do not so much compare, but with a
Dude,
twist, right?
you're a
Like
real competitor. You played a
yeah.
professional sport.
Well, yeah,
You're
but
by nature.
I'm not talking about yeah, I'm competitive there, but I'm also competitive, but I'm not competitive if we play for fun. I am somewhat competitive in our work, but in a motivational sense, and because it's a what's it called, a non-zero game, right? So it's
Exactly.
like if friends of mine who I compete with in some level, if they're successful, I'm really happy for them, right? So I look at rankings and see people that I like being placed really highly there. I'm like,
Yeah.
dude, good for you, because that's the reality, right? Like if you're successful, it doesn't diminish my ability to be successful too, right? So if I see
Yeah.
your paper comes out, I like it and I read it, and in a way, I even want to cite it and promote it. I know that my friends don't cite and promote my papers, but the other way
Yes, we
around, I
do.
do.
I will with your one last year on the repair and whatever. I thought that when as soon as I get a chance, I'm gonna cite it.
Uh,
If ever
yeah,
I write a paper again.
but like I do think that, like to me, a little bit of competition, it's just it spurs me on, like it
Yeah,
motivates me, and
yeah,
it pushes me to do more, and I like that, and I don't want to give that up. So I would never say I'm not competitive. I do want to do more and achieve more, etc. Not then, but it doesn't mean that I'm not happy for the success of others,
yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Anyway.
the issue with competitive with other people is that there's usually a particular game you're competing in, and that game usually has a very specific outcome. So if it's publishing, it's like number of journal papers. If it's in life, it's maybe how much money you're making, whatever it might be. Or if it's basketball, it's the score of the game. And the problem is, if you have that type of competition, you end up optimizing on that score.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's the way we should live our lives.
No, absolutely. Well,
I
first of
like
all, not our
to,
lives and not
yeah,
our profession either. Like,
yeah,
absolutely not. It reminds me of this. There's this recent article in ASQ by Beth Betsky, and she
hmm
writes around, algorithmic and AI in the context of science and what it does to our research and scholarly
yeah,
practices. And like in a nutshell, this entire article says like, look, everything has become a game, and people
hmm
are playing the game and they're doing this well and they're optimizing for the game and they're cheating, and
hmm
like all the things that naturally happen if you set up such a system. And but
Yeah.
you and I, we're both romantics, and we do hold some of the ideal, like the idea of
Yeah.
scholarship, very, very highly. So that
Yeah.
makes me not compete and not try not to engage in the game, like the
No.
citation gaming, the publication volume game, not even the social media posting game. I really try
Yeah.
to do this at the bare minimum because if I would engage in the game, would ruin the setting of the game, which I love so dearly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think
Exactly. We're here, we're in this game because of scholarship. And there are some trappings of scholarship, like number of publications and prestige of publications, but we can't let that get in the way of scholarship. And that becomes the thing people pursue. And we've talked about this a bunch.
we
Anyway,
talked
but
about
this
this.
is this kind of segues into that thing you said. Giannis sent out that
Yes.
LinkedIn, and you and I were texting back and forth about that. But really, that's I think because Giannis, as you and I have talked, I mean, he's the consummate scholar, right? This is someone who
He
has
is.
read deeply in areas you and I have not, and he could lecture us about those things and has. But so this is Giannis Kalinikos, and he posted just something about how chasing the top journals kind of
Well, has ruined
doesn't
our
make
scholarship.
huge it doesn't make the huge impact that like some of the great books. And I know one of the books he mentioned was like Benneger's book. The other one was Zuboff's, and these are people who made big important contributions, and they wrote books. And this whole journal game kind of makes it so that scholarship is not part of our experience. It's this chasing journal publications, right?
Well, he makes two arguments, right? So one of them is the journals versus books, like the format that we choose and the game that comes with some of these formats. In his case, he says there's a game with journals, and we're
Mhm.
chasing the journal publications for the citations and the number and so forth. And I guess he's implying that such a game doesn't exist for books, and we can debate whether that's actually true.
Hmm.
Um, and the other point that he's making is the broader point that IS has lost or missed the wider significance of computerization and informatization. He says, like, we've missed the boat. We've missed it before. The same argument was leveled at us in the context of the e-commerce boom, right? Like the rise of the internet age, where we said, like, where were you when that happened? And he's saying this is happening again now with AI, that we are not seeing the deeper problems. We're not looking at the what does he call it? The relevant bigger picture,
Mhm.
because we are lost in writing little journal papers about the trivial. That's what he says, like the trivial matters that apparently are relevant even though they're not. This is me paraphrasing what he says. And I think both of these points are worth thinking and debating about. Like one of them is the games in publishing formats, and the other one is the are we missing the boat here? Are we focusing on the trivial and missing the broader picture?
Yeah.
And
And I don't
should we
know.
should we do something about it, right?
Well, and the problem is he brings up some great books. So like
Yeah.
Zuboff, you look at the what Age of the Smart Machine or whatever. I forget the name of
Yep.
that book.
That's called
Uh,
that. Yep.
but it's the Automate and Informate book. She draws on Foucault. She really it's a beautiful, beautiful book. If people haven't read it, just go back and read it. It's still relevant today. And and I mean, she wrote a couple of other books. I think she wrote this service or support economy book, which I thought was awful.
And
And
that
then
surveillance capitalism
and
book.
then surveillance capitalism, which is quite popular and everything, but it's not quite the level of the first one. But here's someone who's written books. I don't know if I've ever read a paper by Shoshana Zuboff, but I've read her three books.
I've
So
I've read the automate informate paper. I think it was an HBR in the mid '80s or
yeah, I
something.
don't even know. I don't think I've read any of her papers, but these are big ideas she's wrestling with. This is not a timid person. This is someone who's going after the big ideas, trying to, and I think she's batting 2 out of 3. I think two
Well,
of them actually nailed the big idea in an interesting way, and maybe one didn't so much. But
so
maybe it
so
did,
I
and
will.
I'm just being too critical. But yeah.
No, I don't think you're too critical, but I think you're missing a little other point that he made that I thought was more interesting. Yeah, so he calls out James Benninger and Shoshana Zuboff, which are the book writers. We know them for these books, but he also mentions Jonathan Zittrain and Dana Boyd, both of which are people that wrote about the internet, but they wrote
Yeah.
papers about them. The Generative Internet by Jonathan Zittrain and Dana Boyd, she wrote about, social media and social networking and so forth. And they're not in IS. And I think his point is that, like,
Yeah.
even the big papers on the topics, on some of these ISE topics, haven't been written by IS people. And we read and sit, like, how come a legal person writes about generativity, and which is in fact like a seminal foundation for people that look at digital innovation and stuff like this, right?
Right. So yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. They do write books though, and they're known for their books. And I the way I interpreted Giannis's thing is that this format of the journal paper is one that maybe let's just anticipate two things. One is the format doesn't allow you to develop ideas. The review process maybe kills innovative ideas, and the format of a journal paper is so short that you can only make kind of specific, limited contributions. Whereas with books, if you're tackling bigger issues, maybe the review process is not so brutal and it doesn't it's not so conservative, right? If you think of journal publication, it's very conservative. They will make which one is it? Type two errors.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
yeah.
here's my way to look at this. I mean, the kind of books that I like are not the out of the blue. Here's a book on a topic and it comes up with a big theory. I kind of like the books that have been written. Like here's the work that I've been doing on this topic for 30 years, and now I'm summarizing it all in a book. Like Danny Kahneman.
Hmm.
Yeah, so he does all these studies
You
and
like
all
those
these.
books? I don't like those books. I
Well,
always think they're a
hear me
little.
out, right? So I thought that well, here's a person that he's been studying this for years, done multiple experiments, there's multiple papers on these topics, and then when he's 80, he sits down and he writes, Fast and Slow Thinking, and I thought it not it was horrible to read. Let's be honest, it's too dense. It was really boring to get through, but I like this idea of a book. So like this is me putting everything together. Like I'm overcoming the limitations of these 30-page journal articles because here I'm painting the bigger picture based on all these studies, like afterwards, after the fact. I like
Hmm.
that.
I've read a few
And
of those books. I'm not going to name names because I don't want people to feel bad, but I generally don't like those books. I've done this much research, and here's my summary of all my research. They're trying to do like a Malcolm Gladwell sort of thing with their own research, except that it rarely works.
well, look,
I
Malcolm
prefer if we're
Gladwell
going to
is
go practice, and they're trying to make it for practitioners, and that I love like books with a new idea that are cool. Like if you're thinking practice, books about practice, I like Marshalls, Parker and Van Alstyne and I think another guy, Chowdhury, who I don't know that guy. But that platforms book in 2016, that's like perfect. And then it hits a current topic. It hits all the issues of that topic. And so I'd rather you do something like that than try and take all your research and make it. But those are two different things. I think something like the Van Alstyne book and something like the Zuboff book are a little different. The Zuboff book is it's making an original idea that no one has made before, and it's really giving us a new perspective. Whereas the Alstein book, I think, is certainly really important and really, but it's also a lot of that stuff is out there, and they're just kind of bringing it together. And it's not all theirs. It might be some other people. Certainly, like Marshall, I know, and Jeff did research for 20 years on the topic. But everything in that book isn't just a summary of their research. It's like all the ideas having to do with platforms. Uh, so I don't know. I like it if you're going to compile research, don't just compile your research. Tell me a story of a phenomenon because you're an expert in that phenomenon and include everyone's research, not just yours. Or give me a new idea and go big. Those are like the two books that I really appreciate of the book genres.
so where do you put in that distinction? Where do you put what's his name? Harari's
Oh,
work,
I
the
love those
historian.
books. So
Yeah,
I just read Nexus.
yeah.
And so let me give you an example. And this is going to be awful because I don't want to criticize books, but you got me this, where is it? The Invention of Good and Evil.
Yeah, have you
That
read it?
book's, yeah, so I read that over the holidays, and then afterwards I read Harari's Nexus. Now, these are both that genre of book that is like going back to ancient history and trying to make a nice little uh,
But they both have a big idea.
they have a big idea, but then what's really fun about these books, and this, I would say the last Harari book, I read Sapiens, I didn't read his other one, but the first half of the book is like, you can't stop reading it. You can't stop
Yeah,
turning the pages. It's
agree.
really interesting. And then they start falling into a little bit of political, and some speculation. And when they get to current events, they're less fun. And I think that invention of good and evil, when they start, ranting about Trump and populism and stuff, it's like, all right, so here's a
Well,
European
that
ranting
that
about
they're both
Trump.
historians, right? So the book
Yeah,
that you talk about is a guy called Hanuzawa, and he wrote a book, Invention of Good and Evil.
yeah,
And I thought it was remarkable because it's a 38-year-old dude. He's younger than
yeah,
us, and he's from Frankfurt. He studied philosophy, right? Like Frankfurt,
yeah,
and he mixes philosophy with anthropological history, and he
yeah.
it's a big book. It has a big idea, and it has big scope. And I thought it was impressive
Yeah, and this is
for
my
the
point
for the
with both
scope
of
of
these
the
guys.
book. It's
Yeah,
pretty
the
cool.
scope of the book, it's an okay book, but compared to Harari, Harari's much better. Harari can write, right? The problem is they both lose me because they're historians. When they stick with philosophy and they stick with history, they totally have me turning pages. When they try to now extrapolate that to current events, now with Harari, he actually gets into AI and 10 years of
He
thinking
does,
about
yeah.
AI, and it's pretty great, I think. So I love the first half, but the second half I still stayed engaged. With the other guy, the good and evil guy, he had me for the first half. When he got into current events, he didn't have the AI hook. He didn't have much. He just kind of devolved pretty quickly into political ranting, and that's what I don't like. It's like stick with what you know. I don't want to read someone's ideological diatribes, and that's where they end up going. But
So
yeah,
let me give you a third example of something that I was involved in, right? So in these, when I dabble with entrepreneurship with my friends Fred and Per from Australia, it started off with tech entrepreneurship and sort of moved into a broader area of how entrepreneurial action is enabled through changes in the environment of the firm, not by the big entrepreneurs. There's stuff happening and it makes things more conducive. Anyway, so we started with this. We wrote a particular paper that was about what led to tech startups coming back up. Yeah, so very specific
hmm,
research question, etc. Then
yeah,
we brought a broader version, which was a framework for enablement, another 25 pager, and then
yeah.
another paper, and another paper, and then more people picked up on the idea, etc. What we've now done over the last 2 years is we now wrote a book-like version of that, a 170-page version.
Perfect.
Yeah, so
It
here,
shouldn't be
this is
just your research. Pick the domain and
well,
tell us
we did,
about
right?
the
So we took
research in the domain.
everything that we thought about. Like the interesting bit to me was like this is now the fifth or sixth version of the same idea, and it moves forward. If you go back to the early writing from 2017, some of the ideas when, we think about it differently. And of course, secondly, like there's been work since that
Oh, sure.
been done on these things and so forth. But the key point is this, that this now was an opportunity to take the space that you get from the 170 pages and
Mhm.
discuss some notions, elaborate on some notions like flesh them out more, right? So
Yeah.
there are now, the entrepreneurship journal, there are in the Academy of Management type of journals. There's now a book-like version. There's a Foundations and Trends in Entrepreneurship. It's
Hmm.
not a physical book, but it's like a 160 page book length article. That's what they
Why don't
publish,
you
right?
make it a book?
Well, that's what I said to Per. The next step would be to make it an actual book.
But if you make it a book, make sure your audience is either scholars or it's practitioners.
Well, this one is
And
still for scholars, from scholars to scholars, very clearly.
and then if it is, it's not just a, navel gazing, looking at your own research, and make sure you integrate research and do it for people. But so I get Giannis's argument. So going back to the topic at hand, I get Giannis's argument that if you want to really wrestle with something big and do something, then maybe the journal. But here's the problem: the journal process is not conducive to that. Yes, I think that's pretty clear. But come on. Uh, Journals, why do we have journals? Well, because science is supposed to be a rigorous process and it's supposed to be incremental and it's supposed to build on previous work. And the unit of incremental progress is a journal publication. Now, it's almost like he's criticizing this unit of incremental progress for being a unit of incremental progress. It's like
Well,
saying, oh, this incremental genre is not big enough for me. It's
I
like,
mean,
well, yeah, that's because that's not the reason journal papers exist. Journal papers are there to be a scientific finding, not
well,
big grand
A
theories.
that B. I think there's a couple of more arguments that could be leveled at Yanis here, though. I mean, one on the hand is like we need the incremental stuff, very simply, right? The second one I would say like we can't just only have big theoretical ideas. Like we need some facts, man. So and in the age of AI, I like the fact that now we do see the first couple of very robust, very empirical, very solid fact-finding type of papers out there. No, they're not about big ideas. They're about how some lawyer uses AI and makes his legal arguments better or worse, like by
Yeah.
20% or something
Well,
like
I'll
that,
give you a
right?
perfect example. My paper with Hani and John Lawler, it just came out in MISQ. We just looked at Reddit. We looked at introducing bots to Reddit and how did it impact human to human interaction. Just a little thing saying, look, it broadens interaction. Humans interact with more humans, but it uh, makes them more shallow. So it takes and we could look
Yeah.
at Reddit, we could look at where they had bots, where they don't have bots, and we could
So
see how humans interact with each other.
first of all,
And it's a
we need
very
that.
incremental.
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, like we need that. Very simple. My argument is always, especially in emerging areas, like I want to see some new ways of thinking and talking about it. We need like new vocabulary, sure, which is theoretical, sure, but I love getting some believable and trustable evidence, like
Yeah.
something that looks robust with a good design, with a good study. And I don't need 200 pages for that. Like the
Yeah.
Chan and Chan paper that we gave in Water. That's just a very nice, good study
It's
on,
a
and guess
short
what
paper
happens?
and
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Right. So I want that, and it shouldn't be discouraged. So that's my first point. So
Yeah.
if at best it should be, well, we need both, not either
Well,
or.
yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
Right. It's not like
The
one or the
second
other. We
part
need both.
is
I guess, but real quick, to argue is that academia only rewards the former, not the latter, right? It only rewards
I don't
journal
buy that.
publications.
I don't buy
It
that at
doesn't
all.
reward books. You don't buy that?
I don't buy that one bit. Like,
Hmm.
does it appear in Venki's ranking? No, it doesn't. Like Dana Boyd doesn't appear there, and Shoshana Zuboff doesn't appear in the Venki's ranking. But let's be honest. Like, how important are these rankings with numbers of journal publications? Not very much. If as soon as you talk to someone on the street, first of all, like the big names, including Yanis, we cherish them for especially the books he has written, and not
Yeah.
for the number of. I don't know how many papers he has, but I know his books and I know
Yeah.
the latest of his books,
And
right? So
Shoshana
I think
Zuboff,
books, yeah,
yeah, is a professor at Harvard. So it's not like her career has been that bad. I've
yeah.
never read one of her articles. She has a few books and she's a professor at Harvard.
So I
So
would say in the scholarly conversation, like we do value books. They just don't happen to show up in the quantified, algorithmified rankings that we see
yeah,
everywhere, right? But they show up in Google Scholar citations, by the way. Like books tend to be the
yeah,
most cited things that anyone has ever published. Our good friend
yeah,
Jan Mentling, his Fundamentals of BPM book has what, like 4,000 citations? I can give you 100 IS researchers who don't have that in their combined output.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's number one. Second, if you go outside of academia, if you
Well,
go
look at
into
you. Your
politics,
number one cited thing is your book.
yeah, and it's not even a big idea book, right? It's a methods
Yeah,
textbook.
yeah.
But yeah, so there you go. The other point, as soon as you move outside that academic bubble, if you go into
Dude, that
policymaking,
picture of you
journalism,
is from like 1990. You
you're
gotta,
from 90, you're from
you gotta,
1990.
you gotta update your picture.
I'll show you the picture that you have on your profile, my friend, from 1995 when you
What?
entered the PhD program.
No, I just took it like a month ago when I got this new role. They had made me
Fine,
take a
I'm
new
looking up
picture.
what's my profile pic. Okay, that is actually 10 years old. I remember that. Yeah. Let me get to my second argument. As soon as you go outside and you're thinking about policy influence, decision-making influence outside, like who do the people the politicians, the media, who do they pick? They don't pick anyone that has three ISR. They actually pick scientists based on based on the books that they have written, more so than
Yeah.
any article.
Yeah, well, Harari, our guy, by the way, if you do research on information systems and AI, you have to read Harari's book. He talks
The
about
Nexus book,
information
yeah.
systems throughout the book. He really speculates with AI at the end. I think it's a beautiful book. But in his whatever postscript or the last section, like after the book's over and he talks about his experiences, he wrote this other book that I never read, but apparently was very famous. But it was where he started about AI. But he's a historian. He doesn't actually know anything about technology, and because of that, he was brought into a whole bunch of things as an AI expert.
Mhm.
And it's kind of funny. Here's a historian doesn't know anything about AI since he wrote a book and mentioned AI in 2010 or whenever he wrote it. Uh, He's now but now I would argue he is an expert. So 10 years later with this book, Nexus, he actually is an expert and he's done some deep thinking and some reading about the topic. But no, I think that Nexus book is beautiful. And here's a guy who they're bringing out to talk about these things, the policymakers. So to your point, yeah.
Yeah. The third point I would mention is that, if there's some bigger sociological issues around AI, which there would be, that doesn't automatically mean that IS people need to answer that question. I mean, there's a good reason why we still have, I don't know, sociologists studying certain things that involve digital technology and AI, and so they should. Yeah, I want like, or legal people, or anyone else with their particular, from their expertise, their background, and they should look at the same topic. So we need to own everything that's AI or digital or analytics or whatever. I don't buy that argument, because if we did, then everything looks like through the lens that we have, and it would be arrogant to think that that's the only lens through which to look at the world.
Yeah, I think you're right. Uh, there's many, this is the biggest issue, one of the biggest issues of our time. Information systems, to me, as a field, is kind of socio-technical. What we're good with is the interaction of technologies and humans and organizations. So this fits in our wheelhouse, its implications in the world. But you're right, economists, sociologists, everybody should be paying attention to it. All right,
And I mean, to be
Harari's
honest,
first
yeah.
book was Homo Deus, and I should probably read that next. But I've read *Sapiens* and I've read *Nexus*, and *Nexus* I think is a beautiful book. Everybody has to read it. So
Well, the Homo Deus book is a little bit about AI as well.
yeah, so that's the one where he became an AI expert, but I never read
Yeah,
that. I probably
exactly. No,
should.
I haven't read
Called
that.
it
I've read the other two. Yep.
A Brief History of Tomorrow.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
so, yeah.
So, but I do take away is something that I've said before, is like, I do think we should sit back at some stage and not do this one more journal paper and instead think about writing a book. And that's a big if we have an idea that is worth expanding on 200 pages. And I'll be very honest, like I don't have a book idea. I don't.
Yeah.
Right? I just don't. I don't have anything where I feel like I need 200 pages to
Yeah.
do, like, but also because at the moment I'm very big steeped in empirical matters. I want to see what things look like on the
Yeah.
ground. And
And
like
not
AI,
everybody,
yeah.
yeah, and not
And so
everybody
that's
has
what
to
I
be
want to do at the
Zuboff,
moment. No.
right? Not everybody has to be Zuboff. Some of us can be me. And I like to work with teams and work with young people and get nice papers out, right? Actually, now I like to be a university administrator and go to meetings and do email. But for my scholarship, I like to, uh, play.
But so I think this was in the comments of Yanis's post. I mean, one of the question that was leveled at him, or I don't know, some topic of discussion was whether or not within the journal genre, whether we do allow, whether that also implies that there's only one script for getting theoretical ideas out, whether that script is too limiting, and whether we should be more open, more receptive to, different forms of theorizing, different genres, let's put it this way, of research. And I think that there is some merit to that argument, that you can always say, look, we are scripted. We do like things in a particular format, which then, of course, always makes it difficult to get a new idea in a different format expressed in the same vehicle that we're used to.
Well, this is what people have to realize. First of all, I think big ideas can make it into journal articles. But like I said before, journals are inherently conservative to rigor. So that means you're going to face, I guess, type 2 errors. Things that should be published are going to be rejected. And they're going to be rejected because editors are not confident, reviewers are myopic and obstinate, and people they don't trust their judgment about what is cool, or they don't recognize what is cool. So you're going to get a lot of false negatives. You're going to reject a lot of papers that could have been good. And then what you'll get is a bunch of rigorous, maybe less interesting papers. And that's usually the criticism of the journal medium, is that it's a bunch of boring ass, really rigorous papers. So I think that's just what's going to happen. So can you get a big idea in? Sure. You have to be really lucky. You have to get the right editors, the right reviewers, the right thing at the right time. If you're trying to do it and betting on my big idea is going to make it in, it probably won't, or it'll make it into a B journal and then people won't read it as
Well, you
much.
can look at the other way around. I mean, if I think about the review and publication process of books, I'd say it's prone to type 1 error. It publishes a lot of book, like you don't have type 2 error there, that's for sure. Like
Yeah.
I could give you 10 book publishers who really don't care
A
what
lot
they
of
publish, they
shitty
publish
books.
anything, right?
Yeah.
So there you flip it, which then means we have all the options open. I mean,
Yeah.
there's also short books, right? I mean, like the Yin book is 80 pages, like, and
Yeah.
you don't have to write a magnus opus of 500 pages.
Right.
And I don't buy the argument that it's hurtful to your career. I really don't. Like even
No.
in like not on the ranking, sure. Like what looks at it at the surface, but in promotion, appointment, hiring. Like, have you ever heard of the case that someone's like, this guy has written a book, let's not give him a promotion? I've never
No.
heard that.
No.
Like, if at all, it works in your favor.
Yeah. And sometimes it's the publisher that helps. Like just writing any book doesn't work, but you need a good publisher. So someone like Springer is going to publish anything,
Yeah,
but someone
they
like
do. Don't go with
Oxford
Springer.
University, yeah,
Don't go with
Oxford Uni.
Springer if you can
No.
avoid it. If you can,
Why?
no, if
Well,
you
I
can.
think a lot of Springer books get a lot of eyeballs. Well, wait,
Yeah, they
Springer was
do,
your
but
book, and your
I know,
book's
but I
quite
would just
popular.
wouldn't like that's yeah, I know, but I wouldn't do it again. Like because
Huh?
they're a long tail publisher. Like they I could have written anything, they wouldn't have cared.
Hey, did I
Seriously.
tell you my first book is coming out? It's called
No.
it's called the Consortia Century, and it's this group that I've been working with for over a decade with like Joel Kutcher Gershenfeld and John King, and it's this big group. We have like 20 or 30 of us on the book as authors. It's the Stakeholder Alignment Collaborative. Excuse me. So I've been part of this for like a decade, and we just decided to write a book with some of our ideas. So it's a big group of really multidisciplinary people, and we're talking about how this century consortias, through consortia of public-private organizations is how we're going to move the needle on big problems. So it's a nice little book. It has some nice ideas and it's coming out, but it's Oxford University Press.
Well, that's
So
pretty
this is the
cool.
interesting thing. I'm one of 30 authors of the thing, but it is Oxford University Press. So it's a little bit prestigious so I don't know. I think it's kind of cool. I think it was a very fun experience because it's 30 of us. So we had to reconcile a variety of viewpoints, but
And
yeah.
with
And
30 people, you can't possibly all write. I mean, that's got to be super detrimental.
yeah, I think maybe not everyone wrote, but I would say Joel and I and a couple other people did the integration where we made sure it was like the same voice throughout and made sure that. But I think a lot of people did write, did contribute. I mean, but it's more of one of these things where the team was together for a decade. So it's like everybody has contributed along the way to certain things that we've brought.
Look, I'm fine with that. Like, I don't like this. And I think you said that one, like, so if you want to be an author, you have to write. I'm not so sure because my reality is very often there's a huge discrepancy in ability to write.
Hmm.
Right? And if everyone were to write, then you'd have an inconsistent mix, like from good
Yeah.
writing to bad writing, different vocabulary, different style, different everything. So, like my lived reality over all these years is that it's not a good idea if everyone is an equal writer. That just
Yeah.
makes things unnecessarily more complicated. And there are other ways to contribute beyond, writing paragraph after paragraph after paragraph. My
Yeah.
sad reality is though that like very in the constellation that I'm in, I have to write a lot.
Well, I've
I'd love
always
to
been
be.
that, but now I'm too busy, so I don't write as much, and I have to trust my co-authors, and I find that they're actually really good. And it's like I didn't have to do all that writing that I did in the past. So yeah.
Yeah, oh, I have to work on that.
Hmm.
So, what
All
do we
right.
make? Like,
So
are we getting people to write more books? Are we telling
no,
them to?
I don't think I agree with Giannis. I think those people with big ideas will write books because they need to. They love the scholarship. They have the idea. They will. The Zubovs of the world are going to write the books. The Giannis's of the world, they're going to write the books. Uh, People like me, maybe I'll write a book one day or something, but I like the journal. I like the incremental journal publications. I think it's a nice way to be very precise about what you want to say, be very clear about how your empirical data contributes to what you want to say, and I like the incremental process of scholarship, and I'm comfortable there. And I don't think I'm like a bad scientist or that my incremental stuff is somehow not important. I just don't claim to be doing everything for all people. I don't want to inform U.S. policy. I don't want to say now I can do that. And I think we have different types of people, different dispositions that can do different things, and there's plenty of
No,
room for
yeah, I
that.
like that. I mean, I mentioned this a couple of times over the 5 years here, but Andrew Pettigrew once gave from Oxford gave this presentation on identity, right? Researcher identity. What kind of researcher are you slash do you want to be? Do you want to
Yeah.
be the scholar? Do you want to be the researcher? Do you want to be the educator? Do you want to be the difference maker? Like these are
Right.
four general identities, and and I always interpret them as these are fluid concepts. Like
Yeah.
I can choose to be that identity and I don't have to stick with that. This is not a trait, a stable trait of me. It's a role I want to play and assume for a while, right? So at the
Yeah.
moment, I'm very happy doing fairly empirical, on the ground, practice based research because I just enjoy that for a while. So
Yeah.
at some stage, maybe we all want to just be educators, right? Like we don't talk
Yeah.
a lot about this on the podcast, but this is a very valuable. And to me, even I said this the other day to someone. Like I think this is probably the biggest impact we can leave by educating people
Yeah.
that our
Yeah.
students, especially doctoral students,
Yeah.
not so much in the method, just in the general attitude and so. Anyway, there's difference makers, and they do great work. And like I see some colleagues that are heavily advising, policymakers and so forth, and I admire that as well.
Yeah.
So, like for me, I don't have a big idea, but I would say this: like we started with competitiveness. If I had a big idea, which I
Mhm.
don't at the moment, I just don't think I have a big idea at the moment. Maybe never. If I had one, well, first of all, I probably would go for a book. Second, even if I try to get this not in a book, but in one of the journals or our journals or whatever, well, I sure as hell wouldn't give up just because it got rejected somewhere, right? If
Yeah.
let's say you
Yeah.
had a big idea, and let's say
Yeah.
you got desk rejected for lack of fit or whatever, yeah, or reviewers don't get like what that's it. You just gotta give
Yeah.
up. I'm not, like
Yeah.
so. If you learn one thing, like persistence pays off, and if
Yeah.
you believe in your idea, you gotta stick with that. Like if you believe
Oh,
in
yeah.
it, then
And
like don't put it aside,
yeah,
don't put it in the drawer, don't put it in a bad journal.
go
Just
for
don't
it.
give
Yeah.
up. Go
Find
for
it.
it.
I
Right?
got it. So, but here's the other thing too. And this, let me just kind of make a counter argument to what we're saying. We're basically saying it's all good. Do what you fit. Now, here's the thing. In top universities, the genre they're encouraging is indeed journal publication. And if journal publication is more incremental, then the top universities that value research are valuing incremental research. And is that the case? Yes, clearly. Unless you do something big and you're awesome, then you get rewarded, but you can't plan on that. So is that the case? Sure, but at the same time I think if you have to be that type of person that goes big, and then I think you get rewarded. I mean, look at Giannis. He was at LSE for one of the best schools in the country or in the
Well,
world.
yeah.
Yeah, and so I think the world does value the scholars, but it's a harder path probably. I think the incremental research they're both hard paths, but I think
Yeah, I'd say so.
incremental journal-based research is probably more,
I think it's not even the hard like a difference in hardship or anything. I think it's a difference in reward mechanism.
yeah,
Like one of the nice things, of course, if you play the journal games, is that every once in a while you get that not being revise and resubmit and move towards conditional acceptance and blah, right? So, and if you do this productively, you'll get a paper out every year, say. I don't know, right? Like in
yeah,
some interval. If you're the big idea scholar, like, gee, there's easily 5 years between your books. Like, you have to be
yeah,
able to wait that
yeah,
long without a clear outcome in a world where the informational feeds around you give you
yeah,
all this. Here's a promotion, and here's an achievement, and here's my humble something, something, right? You got to live with that, and you got to tolerate that. I think that's the big difference. How do you handle the
yeah.
absence or perceived absence of reward and gratification? I don't think
And
it's
to go back,
necessarily more or less difficult. It's just different.
well, and to go back to the beginning of this talk, this conversation. It comes down to: are you a competitive person or a goaler? I think you can't be a competitive person and do that with the long-term scholarship. You have to be goal-oriented and have some internal. If you're a competitive person in the sense that you want to make sure you're one of the better, whatever, people in your department or your country or whatever it is that your goal is, along some criteria, I think the journals are the way we keep score that way. Or maybe citations, I suppose, or something. But it's not going to be if you're a competitive, extrinsically motivated, at least to a degree, person. Yeah, you're not. You're going to want to play the journal game.
Well, for a while, I do think there's a temporal dimension to it. I mean, many of the
Yeah,
people that are around me, like, look at you, look at us. Like, you've just changed into an administrator role for a couple of, like, you're changing your identity because
yeah,
you could have said no, like, you wanted to at some level, right? Like,
yeah.
Youngjin was associate dean for a while. Like, so no, we don't continue this ad infinitum, right? We're not writing journal papers, many of them for 30 years in a row.
Well,
So
some people are. Yeah,
yes, some are, of course, but most of the people that I know, they do this for a while, and then they take that liberty and freedom and change
yeah,
direction. Yeah,
yeah,
so I don't know whether maybe my future, like maybe in my 50s, I want to engage more with politics and be more of an advisor. I don't know, but I wouldn't say no. Like
yeah.
I don't say no to the possibility.
Yep.
We'll see.
All right, my brother. So we figured it out, didn't we? Did we solve all the world's problems about journals versus books
No, I
and
think what we've done is we invited a probably angry response from Yanis.
is he going to be upset with us? We probably
Maybe.
mischaracterized his argument.
Probably,
Yeah,
probably. So no,
uh,
so let's say we're not actually directly responding to him anyway. That was the hook that we had to say like that's a topic worth discussing.
yeah,
And like he put it in a short post, right? If we had him on here today, he would have probably given us different type of
yeah,
arguments and so forth. So, it's mischaracterizing, of course. Yeah, of
yeah,
course. It's just a bloody LinkedIn post. And we'll link to it so people can have a look at the original post themselves and see how they would interpret it. It's just it's something that we picked up and thought it might be interesting to discuss it on air for a while
yeah.
anyway.
All right, my brother. Well, good luck in your basketball tryouts.
Jesus.
I hope you can make a shot.
I'll send you a picture of the redness of my face when I'm done.
Yeah,
Like when I'm
uh, when you're barfing in the garbage can on the way out of the gym.
exactly.
All right.
Exactly. All right. Well, my brother, good talking to you. I'll
Good
see
talking to
you
you.
next time.
All right.